Thank you for giving me an opportunity to present. I'll begin the presentation of the intention point of housing planning in response to changed lifestyles in contemporary residential spaces. Let me tell you about the introduction. Housing type of apartment complex dominates contemporary urban housing in South Korea. Apartment complexes gained popularity for uniform mass production of industrial capitalism that prioritizes function and efficiency. Despite the monotonous spatial composition of an LDK, it has penetrated deeply into the overall South Korea housing due to the advantage of convenience. But however, as the capitalist social structure in the 21st century has shifted to a new paradigm that emphasizes creativity over function and efficiency. The characteristics of everyday life are also changing, and the colorful everyday life of residents became important. But the apartment complex still solves the problem of housing shortage, and for consumers, it is a means of asset growth. Apartment complexes are being mass-produced with existing spatial composition. Therefore, to discuss urban and socio-economic sustainability in South Korea's housing culture, inconsistency between the existing housing types and the resident contemporary lifestyles should be the starting point. This study focuses on lifestyles that are newly emerging due to the transition in social structure and analyzes the characteristics of residential spaces that respond to these changes in lifestyle. This is an attempt to overcome the limitations of domestic urban housing, which is represented by the monotonous and uniform apartment complexes for middle-class nuclear families of the 20th century, and to create a residential space that realizes sustainable housing. In this presentation, we try to examine the perspective of housing planning in this new era of changed values and ideas that residential space ought to contain. To this end, by paying attention to the lifestyle that is newly emerging due to the transition of a social structure, we attempted to examine the nature of residential spaces that respond to the characteristics of changing everyday life. In this paper, in this presentation, the views of the general public on lifestyles and architectural experts, such as architects and critics on residential spaces, were analyzed comparatively based on the analysis of lifestyle magazines and architectural magazines. Part 2 is about transition in capitalist social structure and changes in the characteristics of everyday life. As human creativity emerges as a means of production in capitalism, the fundamental essence of everyday life and its values are also changing. A paradigm shift, such as managing their time flexibly, blurring the boundaries between work and life, is required to respect human values and to emphasize an environment where creativity can be cultivated. We analyzes the lifestyle magazines and architectural magazines from the perspective of characteristics of residents, relationship between individual and family, and function of housing to examine the changed attributes of everyday life and the characteristics of new residential spaces to support them. The first point is about changes in the characteristics of residents. In the lifestyle magazines, the existing concept of a four-member nuclear family with clear gender roles was no longer valid, and a new concept of residents with diverse and multi-layered attributes emerged. In particular, most of them were engaged in creative occupations, and the job titles too varied dramatically. They were more interested in actively revealing the content and interests of their work rather than emphasizing their position in the organization. In addition, they tried to develop their individuality and identity by pursuing various professional hobbies. They are interested in integration of diverse and heterogeneous cultures and decorating the house and revealing their tastes and personalities. In contrast, in the architecture magazines, specific references to the residents or their lifestyles were quite limited. Attempts to reflect the differentiated characteristics of residents were mostly focused on the aesthetic values of the architecture from the outside. Critics took a critical position on the formative nature of housing. However, they favorably evaluated the cases of experimenting with the distinct spatial diversity of each room as against the homogeneous arrangement of rooms in the in the apartment. In addition, in the case of multifamily housing, it was found that attempts to reflect the characteristics of residents lead to aspirations for various housing types and specialized units, which is beyond the scope of apartments. The next point is about changes in the relationship between individual and family. Recent lifestyle magazines show that family members enjoy feeling each other's presence and a sense of family togetherness. And for this, the boundaries of space tended to be flexible. The relationships between family members become closer, leading to true happiness, unlike previous family communities. The recent ones show the characteristics of flexibility and seek to communicate together while respecting individual identity and freedom. The spatial solution for this constitute an open plan, sliding doors, transparency, and common spaces such as corridors and stairs for social spaces. Open plan, flexibility, and transparency were also planning elements that appeared consistently for communication in architectural magazines. Furthermore, the architectural magazines consider the inside or outside void spaces and common spaces combined with these various void spaces as communication spaces. In the process, the social function of the existing living room was reduced and its status was relatively weakened, while the importance of the kitchen has grown in the context of communication. The most important sensory element for family communication is sight. Therefore, an interest is the section of space beyond the uniform floor height of the apartment is found. The next point is about the function of housing. In response to the change in the function of housing, the general public focused on the residential space as a workspace and preferred the complex use of space rather than its functional differentiation. However, the architectural experts consider privacy and view as the most essential features of housing layout. They focused on physical and mental relaxation, and from a relatively conservative point of view, it was desirable to have a house that preserves its original value as a house. In the part 3, I will explain the characteristics of ideal lifestyles corresponding to the contemporary social structure, lifestyle magazine's positions with regard to intention point of housing planning. After analyzing the lifestyle magazines from the view of the intention point of housing planning, we concluded that the general public viewed houses as a creative place for gaining inspiration and ideas because creativity is the core in many works, and human creativity is a talent that must be continuously cultivated through experience and environment rather than through simple efforts in a short time. The general public tend to think the home must become a creative place where new inspiration and ideas can arise through various experiences and stimulation for residents. In addition, as the general public wanted to break away from the idea of an average nuclear family, engage in various creative occupations and pursue their individuality and identity continuously through various professional hobbies, they also wanted to establish and express their taste and identity through their house, because only one's taste, individuality, and unique identity are now linked to potential economic value and are recognized as the most important assets. And home interiors is a source of creative inspiration and ideas. The general public want to experiment with ideas and examine the results in their own way by decorating the house. It also helps one can discover and refine one's own taste. Reflecting this trend, lifestyle magazines in recent times do not find the references of ideal housing in the same building type category such as housing. Unlike architectural experts who want a house to be a house above all else, the general public wants a house not to be just a house more than anything else. The general public wanted the house to be a creative environment by introducing various cultural, artistic, or commercial elements from places such as cafes, hotels, commercial facilities, libraries, studios, and art galleries into the house. In the part 3, interviews with the residents, i.e., the general public, was the basis for the main analysis. However, in the part 4, the analysis of architectural magazines and the views of experts in the field of architecture. The architecture experts were also intent on life by pursuing a rich and abundant life that does not lose diversity and creativity. However, they were interested in realizing the essence of everyday life and to enrich it further rather than stimulate creative experiences that follow trends. In other words, they aim to live a life where they can feel the specialness and joy of every moment with gratitude and experience the freedom of existence. Therefore, they take a critical stance on residential spaces that miss the meaning of everyday life and cannot enjoy its richness. And the source of this richness of everyday life is above all nature rather than culture or art. It is praiseworthy for its delicate and wonderful characteristics of nature that change softly from moment to moment. Between life and architecture, nature brings relaxation and abundance to human emotions, enhances the quality of life, and becomes a source of inspiration. Therefore, architecture experts were yearning for a space that awakened and sharpened one's senses and sensibility so that one could feel the richness of everyday life and the delicacy of nature with the senses and spirit of the whole body. The senses of the body and emotional depth, such as contemplation and reflection, were considered important. The architectural experts consider it ideal to contemplate life with thought and meditation, to realize the true meaning of life and to attain self-realization. As a result, there is a tendency to pay particular attention to spaces such as yards, terraces, and various transitional spaces between inside and outside where one can breathe with nature delicately and enjoy leisure of everyday life. Therefore, in architectural magazines, rather than wanting a house to become something other than a house, there is a strong desire that a house does not lose its essence, while art gallery like houses favored by the general public are subject to criticism. The only building type that is used as an ideal reference other than housing is the religious religious space for prayer. It emphasizes on the contemplative emotions that enable people to realize the meaning of life and existence. In addition, architectural experts seek a house that is open to the possibilities of life rather than a house where everything is perfectly defined by the architect and does not allow the intervention of its residents. They wanted to create a new meaning by adding a new story of residents to the house every moment, because small but different and unpredictable everyday pleasures and novelties should be hidden in every corner of the house. In other words, they consider the most desirable residential spaces as an infrastructure of possibilities, a flexible structure that is open to diverse and affluent everyday life. It eventually becomes a unique and authentic place that cannot be compared with any other houses. Housing should bring in diversity and creativity in life and allow people to experience the freedom of life and existence through architecture. In conclusion, uh, In the case of the general public, they focus more on the new paradigm of the changing social structure, while the architectural experts place more importance on the fundamental dimension of life and existence that does not change. The conservative views of the architectural experts may be considered as lagging in accepting new trends and compared to the general public. However, it can also be regarded as an attitude that prioritizes intrinsic values rather than changing trends. But considering a sense of life that cannot be captured in the existing rigid apartments can be seen as a common goal that must be reached in contemporary domestic housing to gain sustainability. Thank you for listening.